Alright guys, in today's video, it's like a maintenance type video. I wasn't even going to do this, but something went wrong, so I thought it was worth showing. So every 100,000 miles on the old body style trucks, on the Vortec V8s, the 5 liter and the 5.7 liter, you should change the spark plugs. And we were going through that process, putting in a set of new AC Delco 41993s, and then we had this problem occur. So one of these ended up getting corroded to the boot, and then when we went to remove the plug, the boot broke off. So what I'm showing you this for is, how do you know when it's time to replace the spark plug wires, right? They don't necessarily have to be done at the same time as the spark plugs. You know, what happened here, the boot just disintegrated, so I don't have much to show you here. The water had intruded up past the porcelain and got on here and fused these together. That was one thing that happened. And then the corrosion, you know, these green crusty materials you see on the corrosion, they worked their way into and damaged the carbon that's on the interior of this fiberglass wire and caused it to get very brittle. And that's how you can tell when it's time to change these. If you take one off and you notice that it's got these firm bends in it, right? This part here is still flexible. This part over here, when it went and bent, it broke. That's when you know that these have to go too, right? The other end is fine. There's no corrosion on the end that goes to the distributor cap. And we can look at several of these that I've taken off already, and we can see these sharp bends, right? Now sometimes they're more obvious than others, like this one. It's okay to have wavy bends. They're going to be like that when they come out of the package. But you don't want to have these sharp bends. The other thing that you want to replace when you're pulling these, most of the time what will happen is these retainers will break as well. Typically what you want to do on these retainers is take a small flat pry bar, you stick it in like this, there's a little piece here that you just give it a little twist and it comes up. And there's one in the back here that you just have to wiggle off. What usually goes on these is this plastic hinge after so many years will give out. So I've got a couple of those that just in the process of trying to do what we need to do here, you know, the tops have broken off of them. So I'm going to show you all the part numbers for this, and I'm going to show you a couple of these just for reference. But I figured it was worth sharing as we got in here. So we're over on this side, and we're just about to do the number 7 plug wire. Something else you want to make sure you do. It wouldn't have saved the example I brought up here because at some point these guys get too brittle. But you want to put some dielectric grease into the boot on both ends before you reassemble it. That'll help keep the moisture out. This is not a conductive material. It's actually not conductive. It's designed to keep water out. AC Delco 10464 or GM 12345579. That's what I use on most of these kind of jobs. I'm also going to show you the number 1 plug. I've done all the others of these, and I'll show you one of these retainers just so you can see the technique. These newer numbers, this is an individual set. You can get these as a set with everything with the coil wire, or GM even sells them individually. A lot of these are discontinued, so you can usually find these cheaper individually. This 1935 1565 happens to be the single wire for the number 1. And if we open this guy up, take him out. You know, sometimes there'll be a little packet of AC Delco dielectric. Not always, though. It's not very consistent. You can see we want the boot to be very supple. The other thing you'll notice on the old ones is they get very brittle, and you squeeze them, they crack, or you squeeze them and they stay deformed. That's another indicator. Even if the wiring itself is straight, that's another indicator that you should replace it. But you can see this one fresh out of the package. There's not a single sharp bend in it, right? And that's the point I was making about how you know when to replace these. You don't have to replace them all the time, and I do recommend you use the OEM version when you do replace it, because you'll get 10, 15 years out of an OEM version versus what you get in the parts store. You might not get even a couple of years out of it. When I remove these boots, I already put these new plugs in before I had that problem happen on the other side. What we're going to do is open up this retainer like I showed you. So we're just going to take this little 2-prong one right here, stick, zoom in here, we can see we're sticking our curved little pry bar in there. This one's also just broke off just like that, right? They're very brittle when they get old. pop these wires out of here. Now to get this guy off, and you can see these brackets have multiple ones for different applications, so yours might look different. This is a 1998 5.7 liter, so it's got the little two-pronger in this position. I like to take some long-nosed pliers, just kind of grab it across the top. Sometimes it'll come off without breaking. This one kind of cracked off there, unfortunately, but that's all, again, part of the problem, right? So the whole thing just shattered. But sometimes this part will be more robust and it'll come off without that happening. The part numbers on these retainers, there's 3 different flavors for this engine. The one I'm going to put on here is a 1213 2229 from GM. It had a bunch of these. That's why it's in a regular package. It just looks like that. And to install it, all we have to do is just push it down on to this bracket till it snaps, and then we're ready to put these 2 plugs in there like so, and then we'd be able to close this piece here. The other type you're going to have is a one that holds 4. These are the 2 that are up by the distributor cap, 8889, 1792. So you'll find these sitting up here, right? So as soon as we replace these 2 wires, we'll also replace this retainer. And then the third and final type that you'll run into is a 3-position one. Has a place for 3 wires. That's a 1216 3607. And an example of where that one is used is right down here. This one's a 3-pronger. If you guys can see that. I'll see if I can go ahead and pull that guy out. Maybe we can get him off without him cracking on us. Might block your view for just a second here. But I try to come in here, get as many of the prongs as I can, and just kind of rock it until it... Now this one I heard it's cracking as well. It came off intact though. So you can see it just gets very brittle and just cracks on the back here. So we'll replace that one with that last part number I gave you. So that's really all that I wanted to share here and show you. I'll put all these part numbers in the description. I'll also put the part number for the plugs if you happen to be doing them as well. But my advice is when you're doing your plugs and you find these kind of little bends like I showed you, go ahead and replace the wires. And as you take these off and you find out that you need to redo the retainers, if you find one broke, my advice is replace them all. Very similar if you have just one plug wire break. If you've replaced them recently, you can go ahead and just replace the one. That's why GM sells them individually. But if it's been a few years, I would take that as a sign that you need to replace them all. I like using something like this to get them off. You'll notice when I grab them right here. You don't ever want to grab and put any pressure on the fiberglass part or the part where it goes into the boot. You either want to grab it here or you want to grab it here. And that's the easiest way to get that off. So I'm just going to work these off of here. And what I'm going to show you after I get done with this is one more thing, is where we can go ahead and check for misfires after we've replaced everything. All right, guys, just showing you this number 1 plug after you take them out of the package. See the bend on the old one? You also, this is another opportunity to check the length to make sure they're the same as well. But that's what we're looking at right there. So that's another sign that this guy is in need of replacement. And then just also show you the dielectric. Come over here and grab our tube of dielectric. I'll show you putting that on there just so you can see how I do it. So this is the distributor side. I'm just going to run it around the electrode connector. And on the boot side, we just want to get it like that. You don't need a lot. It's just mostly to lubricate the porcelain piece as it goes on. And then we'll come down here and we'll route this guy. I'll push him until you feel it click. Just going to go ahead and route him all the way up. Now we're going to go replace these two, so we're not going to push them in all the way yet. And once we replace these retainers, then we'll snap them into position. All right, guys, I'm just showing you some of the part numbers that were involved in these singles. 1935, 1565 was cylinder 1. It's also used for cylinder 3. Cylinder 5 used a 1935, 1562. Cylinder 2 used a 1935, 1564. There's a bunch of other numbers here. Some of them have blown away, so I don't have them handy right now. But some of the other ones were a little older. For number 7, I used a 1219, 2358, which is an earlier superseded number. For number 8, a 1219, 2356. For the coil, we used an 8898, 4268. And again, it's usually cheaper to buy the whole pack, and I'll put that part number in the description, but I managed to find these cheaper individually. It's not always that case, but you should always check. All right, guys, on the driver's side, let's take a look at the routing. Go ahead and close this guy here. Make sure this sensor wire stays on the outside. All right, so here's our number 1 cylinder and our number 3. 1's on top, 3's on the bottom. I still have to replace this 2-position one here. 1's on top, 3's on the bottom. Number 5 and number 7 come into the first two positions of this 3-position retainer. Then they all run up into this 4-position one that hangs loose, and then they go into this 4-position one that's on a bracket. The hinges are on the front side on both, and then you have your routing into your distributor. Pro tip, do them one at a time. That way you won't have any chance of messing up your firing order on your distributor. Let's go take a look at the passenger side routing. All right, on the passenger side, we got our number 2 and our number 4. 2 and 4 on our 2-position one. 2 and 4. And back here, I still have to replace this one, so I've got one more of these to do here. 6 and 8. These guys come up on the back here to a 4-position one here that's just hanging loose. There's no bracket that it attaches to. And then it goes into the distributor. And then also don't forget to do your coil wire. When you do your coil wire, make sure you retain your wire loom that it should have had. If it's missing it, make sure you replace it. All right, let's take a look at the misfires. All right, guys, we've finished up with all these wires, so we've started up the engine. I'm just going to go through and do a check before we go inside and check for misfires with the scan tool. I've got a little tool here called a firing indicator. I'm going to zoom in here, hopefully to show up in the camera. I'm going to use this to make sure we're actually getting a charge through each ignition wire. So hopefully that's showing up. When you zoom in here, that little orange neon lamp is indicating that we're getting a firing through the plug. So I use a tool like this to check all of these to make sure that we're actually getting something from the distributor all the way down to the spark plug. We'll check all 8 with this tool and make sure they're good. All right, guys, let's start this engine up and do a test of misfires, or a check for misfires. So the tool's going to reboot here because the crank and the voltage draw down. Let's wait for it to come back up. All right, let's go back in here and build the vehicle. So why are we doing this? Well, first of all, I'm doing this because we didn't have misfires to begin with. So of course, this kind of test presumes you did not have a pre-existing problem. And what we're doing is trying to make sure we did not introduce a problem. All right, so we are looking first at data display, engine data, misfire data. So what we want to see here is, so we presume we had no misfires to begin with, and I do check these kind of things before replacing plugs and certainly before placing wires. Now we want to make sure we still don't. So here we can see the engine's running just fine, and we don't have any misfires occurring on any of the 8 cylinders. So you want to give it a few seconds to see if that stays the case. What are we doing this for? Well, we're doing this for a couple of reasons. We wanted to make sure that we didn't have any dud plugs. Really a super rare occurrence with an OEM plug, but it can happen. We want to make sure we don't have any dud plug wires, and we want to make sure we did not inadvertently not connect everything properly when we were connecting the plug wires. This also will give us a check if for some reason we messed up and plugged the wires into the wrong positions. So now we're seeing we're fine. So that's it, guys. We're done with this video. I mean, the only other thing I could look at is that same information is probably going to be also contained in a graphical form on this particular tool. And we can also see here we have absolutely nothing on the graph. So that's it. I hope this video is of some value to you. And it's kind of a unplanned video, so it's kind of erratic. I apologize for that, but I wasn't planning on that plug wire to break during a routine plug maintenance replacement. Again, the plug should be replaced on these old body style engines every 100,000 miles, just like it says in your owner's manual. I'll put the years in the title that this video applies to and the part numbers. This is going to be old body style trucks with the Vortec 5-liter and the Vortec 5.7-liter, although obviously conceptually it applies to the 4.3-liter and the 7.4 as well, but those are different plugs and different part numbers. If you found anything in here that you have a question about, or you got a comment on what we did, go ahead and leave it below. I'll try to help. And again, if it helps you, take a moment to hit that like button. I'd really appreciate it. It helps pay it forward. And as always, thanks for watching.